From the campus studios of Saarland University, this is RoPeCast, a lighthearted podcast for learners of English, with Roger Charlton and Peter Tisha.
This is RoPeCast wishing you happy holidays. And as usual this time of year, I have to do this without Roger Charlton. He is out to do some Christmas shopping, but I do have a replacement. Our regulars might know him. It's Paul Kingsbury. Hi, Paul.
Hello, yes.
And as our regular listeners would also know, Paul is quite a music expert. And I'm taking the opportunity to talk to you about music again. Do you know what my favorite Christmas pop song is?
Well, I know you're a big fan of The Boss, Bruce Springsteen.
Yes, and it is from The Boss, right. Bruce Springsteen, he has such a wonderful version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. You know that version?
I do, yes. It reached number 9 in the UK singles charts.
Only number 9?
In 1985.
I can't believe it. It's such a great song.
Yeah.
He had a number 1 hit in that year, didn't he?
Not in the UK as a single, but yeah, sure. His Born in the USA
Born in the USA
was a very, very big hit, yeah.
Yeah.
He's never had number 1 in Britain.
Never had. No. Well, okay, that's the Brits for you, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it was number 1 in the US one time, but anyway, that is a great Christmas song. I like the 80s anyway.
That's right. It was a great era for Christmas songs.
The 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are others than Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, yes. I mean, it started out in a very sad way because in December 1980, John Lennon was murdered in New York by a deranged fan. This brought, actually, a whole lot of John Lennon songs back into the charts. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 John Lennon number 1 singles around Christmas 1980. They were the modern songs like Starting Over and Woman, but also his classic Imagine, and the famous Roxy Music cover version of Jealous Guy, all in those weeks after his murder.
Okay. So he finally made posthumously a number 1 Christmas song on Christmas.
Sadly not. He was replaced.
He did not make number 1 on Christmas Eve.
No, he was replaced by a classic Christmas novelty record with children's choir called "There's No One Quite Like Grandma." By the St. Winifred's School Choir.
Wow, I didn't know that one. I know another English Christmas pop song.
From the 80s.
From the 80s, though, that I think was number 1 on Christmas. It's by a group called Wham! Wham! Exclamation mark, I think. And it's called Last Christmas. Did that make number 1 in the UK, too? Was that very popular in the UK?
Well, let me start by saying that it sold 500,000 copies in 1 week.
Ooh.
But it only made number 2. and can you guess why? We're talking about 1984 here.
1984. Now, of course, that's a novel, but I'm not. And you're not alluding to that, I believe.
No. That was the year in which the Great Famine in Ethiopia took place.
Wait. There was this pop hero choir sort of thing.
That's right. It was organised by an Irish singer called Bob Geldof, and the project was called Band Aid.
Band Aid,
yeah.
Right.
And their Christmas single was called Do They Know It's Christmas? And I believe it sold 2.5 million copies.
Whoa, 2.5 million copies. I remember Band Aid, but I think especially for our younger listeners, you would actually have to explain what Band Aid is.
Well, yes,
was, of course.
Yes. It was a collective of artists of the 1980s who recorded this charity single called Do They Know It's Christmas? In fact, it was released many times and got to number 1 in 3 different years at Christmas.
Who were the artists in that group?
Well, some of course, are well known even today, like members of U2 and Phil Collins, but others were 80s teenage idols like Boy George and Duran Duran and Bananarama and other such acts.
Yes, I remember them.
Yes, so do I. But yeah, And of course, after the single, Bob Geldof went on to organise the Live Aid concerts in July 1985, which were broadcast all around the world and featured most of the biggest names in rock and pop at that time.
Didn't he repeat that a few years later? He organized another one of those worldwide concerts
That's
for
right.
to aid the poor.
In 2005, it was called Live 8 because it took place at the same time as the G8 summit in Scotland.
Ah, okay. And he repeated the Christmas thing again also, didn't he? He did another version of the Do They Know It's Christmas?
That's right. There were two other versions in 1989 and again in 2004. That's right. It was called Band-Aid 20 then.
With different artists.
Yes, obviously. No one remembers Bananarama these days. So,
Who were the artists on the more recent versions?
well, on Band-Aid 20 in 2005, Sir Paul McCartney himself was there, but also more recent stars like Keane, Sugar Babes, Robbie Williams, Dido, or Dido as you called, I forget now.
I think Dido.
Yes. Also members of Coldplay and U2 and other groups too. So, and Will Young, yes, Natasha Bedingfield, Snow Patrol, all these modern stars that we know and love.
Were they as successful with this newer version as they were with the original version of the 80s?
Well, they certainly reached number one, but they weren't there for quite as long. I see it was 11 weeks in the charts in 2004 and 20 weeks in the charts in 1984. And of course, in the 80s and 70s, you had to sell many more records to get into the charts. So I guess it wasn't quite as popular.
So in a way, the 70s and especially also the 80s was a sort of a golden era for Christmas pop songs.
That's right. I mean, you perhaps you could sell millions of records and really to keep your career going by a Christmas hit.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Christmas? I mean, I started off with my favorite Christmas song from the 80s, Bruce Springsteen. What would yours be?
Well, that's right. From that era, I'm very partial to the Pogues and Kirsty MacColl. A Fairy Tale of New York.
And why do you like it so much?
It's a very attractive arrangement of an Irish folk song style, and quite a moving story about a man down and out, and probably in prison on a very, very cold Christmas night, and he thinks back to the days when he first met his girl, and however things didn't work out between them, and there's one section where they both insult each other in words I couldn't possibly use on RoPeCast.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Speaking of RoPeCast, I think we have to end this RoPeCast, but of course not without wishing all of you listeners out there a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bye. Signing off is Peter Tischer, together with
Paul Kingsbury, and here are the Pogues and Kirsty MacColl.
So happy Christmas.
You've been listening to RoPeCast, brought to you by Saarland University, featuring Roger Charlton and Peter Tischer. Tune in for the next edifying episode on your podcast dial.